Hey everyone! This video is going to explain the homework assignments for the Week 3 module. Now, I know when you click on the Week 3 Homework Assignments tab, it seemed like there was a forever long list of assignments this week. And yes, there are quite a few in terms of numbers. However, the majority of the assignments are grammar and mechanics review. And so hopefully, since there's not a lot of writing involved, like paragraphs and responses and short answers or things like that, hopefully this is much more of a review. I would almost want to call them exercises instead of homework assignments, but everything is kind of lumped in as homework assignments. So it does, there are quite a few listed, but hopefully, each one, you kind of sail right through. Hopefully, if you haven't gone over the material in the Week 3 module, if you run into any difficulty with these assignments, please be sure to go back and look at that specific lesson, whichever assignment it is that you're struggling with. I know this is somewhat of a review for a lot of you, so if you're able to complete these assignments without going through the module material, that's probably fine for this week. But again, if you get into any of these assignments and you do start to struggle and you're like, oh wait, I don't remember this stuff, then just know that each assignment has its own lesson up in the Week 3 module. And so you can go back to whichever one you're struggling with, read through the written instructions that are provided or the written, handout that's provided, and if you also want, you can watch my video explanation. So the materials are there. I know some of you may skip right to the homework assignments this week. That's okay. But the lessons are back up in the module if you start to struggle with anything. Okay. So the first thing that's listed are the chapter readings for this week. These chapter readings are literally grammar and mechanics related as well. So again, that might be a good resource for you to go to as well if you start to struggle with any of the specific assignments for this week. I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time reading those chapter readings that are assigned because it literally is just an explanation of the grammar rule and then examples. All right, so it's there more as a resource for you as opposed to a real chapter assignment this week. So the next item that's listed is, of course, the Week 3 journal. And for this week, I'm asking you to think about and explain how you would put together the perfect party. How would you plan the perfect party or get together? It doesn't have to be a big, huge to-do. But just how would you plan a gathering? You could think of it like a process. What is your process for the preparations involved? Think of the process for it, the preparations, the supply list, events or entertainment, food and drinks, the guest list, etc. If you were planning a party, and it can be a kids party, it could be a family party, it could be like an adults only party, it could be a bachelorette party or a bachelor party or something like that. Any kind of party, how would you go about planning it? What is your process? And just write for 10 minutes on that, right? Okay. The next assignment that's listed is Week 3 Assignment 1, Fragments and Run-Ons. So these two lessons are covered separately up in the Week 3 module. There's a lesson on sentence fragments and a lesson on run-on sentences and comma splices. The assignment, though, is both of them together, right? So part 1 is on sentence fragments. You'll see that there are 5 groups of sentences in part 1. Each group has a fragment in it. Only one in each group. Your goal is to underline or highlight the fragment and then correct it. If you go through the little handout provided up in the module material under this lesson, you'll see that there are very easy ways to correct these mistakes. Typically when we have a sentence fragment, it's because we forgot to attach it to the complete sentence it goes with. So a lot of times the fragment actually goes with either the sentence right before it or the sentence right after it, in which case you're just going to need to fix a little punctuation and maybe some capitalization of letters or uncapitalizing of letters. There's not a whole lot of work involved in making the correction. It should, once you identify the fragment, it should be super easy to fix it. And remember, the fragment is the sentence that looks like a sentence. It's trying to pass itself off as a sentence, but it's not complete for one reason or another. So what you underline or highlight should start with the capital letter of that sentence and go all the way to the period of that sentence. And again, you should only be underlining or highlighting one sentence per group. That's it. And there are no other mistakes that need to be corrected in each group. Everything else is perfectly fine the way it is. So literally, just find the fragment, underline it or highlight it from the capital letter to the period, and then fix it. And you can fix it by retyping the sentences underneath the originals. Okay? Part 2 is on run-on sentences and comma splices. So you have 9 groups of sentences, and in each one there is either a straight run-on sentence or a comma splice. So remember, a straight run-on sentence is when we have 2 or more sentences just jammed together with no punctuation separating them. The first sentence just runs right into the next. So that means the first letter of the second sentence isn't capitalized. It's still lowercase because it just all runs together. A comma splice is when we have those 2 complete sentences jammed together and we have just a comma separating them. Remember, that's a big no-no. Now, this is the lesson where I imagine some of you might need to go back and look things over. Because even students who have pretty good writing skills often don't know or have forgotten that a comma by itself is not strong enough to join 2 sentences together. So you might want to go back and at least look over the written handout for run-on sentences and comma splices. Maybe watch the video, but just a little refresher for that one. If you're not even sure, especially if you don't know what a comma splice is, that should be a good indication that maybe you need to go back and review that particular lesson real quick. All right. But anyway, back to what you're actually required to do for the assignment. Again, each group of sentences has a straight run-on sentence or a comma splice. Your job is to fix it. Now, also in the handout that goes with the run-on sentences and comma splice lesson, I go over 4 ways of correcting these errors, this type of error. You can, obviously, if you've got 2 complete sentences that are jammed together, just separate them and make them 2 separate sentences. Put a period where the first one ends and capitalize the first letter of the next one. That's super easy though, and if you keep doing that, you're just going to end up with a bunch of short, choppy sentences. So you don't want to use that method every time. You want to use some of the other ones. The second method was to use a semicolon, because a semicolon is strong enough to bring 2 sentences together and let them remain connected. A comma is not, but a semicolon is. So you can use that. In the handout and video lesson, I mentioned that the best time to use a semicolon is when you have a conjunctive adverb like however or therefore or thus. But that's not mandatory, right? But again, you don't want to overuse semicolons. So the next method that you can look into does involve a comma, but it's a comma with a coordinating conjunction. In the coordinating conjunction, there's only 7 of them: and, but, or, for, nor, so, and yet. So a comma with one of those words can combine 2 sentences and let them stay together. And then the fourth option is a little more elevated, right? Shows a little more skill, and that is taking one of the complete sentences and making it incomplete, using a word that will make it a dependent clause, right? Those are the subordinating conjunctions. There's a list of those words very first lesson in the week 3 module. They're useful words for grammar, I think I called it. So try to use all 4 of those methods at some point as you're correcting the error in these 9 groups of sentences. And again, there's only one spot where there is a run-on or comma splice. Just because you see a comma doesn't mean that it's a comma splice. Commas are necessary in writing for lots of different reasons. So just because there is a comma, that's not necessarily a comma splice. Check to make sure that you've got a complete sentence on one side and a complete sentence on the other. If you do, then it is a comma splice. But there's one error, either of a straight run-on sentence or a comma splice in each of the 9 groups. Your job is to fix it, right? And I would fix it by typing it over underneath the original. That way I can see exactly what you did and there's no confusion on either of our parts. I can look up and see the original, and right underneath it I'll see your version, right? Okay. The next item for homework in week 3 is week 3 assignment 2, eliminating ineffective writing. And so in this lesson, I talked about how to make your writing less wordy, getting rid of a bunch of useless words, useless repetition, cliches, clutter words. It's not very difficult to kind of wrap your head around. It's a little more difficult to keep yourself from doing it in your own writing. But the first part is on eliminating wordiness, and we've got 7 phrases that are a little wordy. They could be said in much simpler terms. So your job is underneath each one, say it in simpler terms. It can be, you can get most of them down to just one word, right? So like, for instance, number 1 is in an efficient manner. If I were to say, she works in an efficient manner, how else could I say that phrase at the end with just one word? She works. Figure it out. All right. Part 2 is on cliches. You've got a list of 10 cliches there. I want you to choose 7 of them and write them in your own words. Right underneath the original, write it in your own words. You don't have to be creative or colorful with it. Literally just type what the cliche actually means, right? What do we mean when we say don't burn your bridges? So write your answer underneath the original. Choose 7 of them. And then cliches continued. There's a second part on cliches. This is the last activity for this assignment. There's a paragraph. That paragraph is chock full of cliches and clutter words. I'm asking you to identify at least 10. So underline or highlight them. Anytime you see a cliche or a clutter word, underline it or highlight it. But don't just go, underlining and highlighting things willy-nilly. Make sure that it's really a cliche or that it's really a clutter word, right? There's like 30-something total in the paragraph. I'm only asking you to get 10. All right? So that should be pretty simple. Just make sure that what you're underlining or highlighting is truly a problem. And then the next item for homework this week is week 3 assignment 3, modifiers. All right, so there's of course a lesson on this up in the week 3 module if this isn't something that you're real familiar with. But we've got a list of 15 sentences, and these sentences either have a misplaced modifier or a dangling modifier. I have put part of the sentences in bold to kind of draw your attention to how you can maybe figure out what the problem is in the sentence. So for instance, in number 2, I have the waiter served the chicken in a gorilla suit. And in bold, I have the chicken in a gorilla suit. So that's to draw your attention to maybe say, was the chicken in a gorilla suit? Probably not. Well then, what do we do about this? Who or what was in a gorilla suit? And then rewrite the sentence so it's clearer. Rewrite your answers underneath the original, right? And the 4th assignment for this week is week 3 assignment 4, sentence combining. So you've got 5 groups of sentences, and your goal is to, for each group, take all of the main ideas in the group of sentences and combine all the main ideas into one single grammatically correct sentence. I tell you in the instructions that you can use a semicolon once, but honestly, you shouldn't need to. You're not trying to take every single word of each sentence and put it all together in one humongously long, crazy sentence. The main ideas. Put it into one single grammatically correct sentence. Again, there is a lesson on this in the weekly module if you'd like to see some examples. Okay. And again, just write your answer underneath each original group of sentences. Okay. And then, of course, the last assignment for this week is the week 3 discussion, how to prepare for an exam. So I want you to think about how you personally prepare for a test or an exam. And if you were going to explain to someone how you do it or how best to prepare for an exam, what would you say, right? So your instructions could be limited to what you do literally the day of the exam, or maybe what you do the night before the exam, or perhaps you want to start explaining how you prepare, you know, in the days or weeks leading up to the exam. The time frame's up to you, but the idea is to take us through your process of preparing for an exam, guide us through the steps, right? So don't forget to have that answer, your response to the prompt, hopefully posted by Thursday night at 11:59 p.m. And that way everyone has more than enough time to respond to 2 classmates before the discussion closes Sunday night at 11:59, right? If you have any technical difficulties with the discussion or any of the other assignments, submitting them, please let me know right away. And of course, if you have any questions about how to complete any of the assignments, again, the first thing I would do is go back to the lesson in the weekly module that goes with that assignment and at least look over the written part, maybe watch the video. And if you're still struggling, then of course reach out to me and I will help you as best I can. All right? Otherwise, good luck on everything. Again, I know it's quite a few items, but hopefully you guys just knock them out one by one, right?